Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 24th episode of Magicians Without Borders Conversations. My name is Carlos López, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today. We have a great episode for you. We're going to talk about changing the state of refugees with humanitarian magic. This is a topic that is very close to our hearts, and we're going to be joined by a wonderful founder called Jamie, and he is the founder of a great NGO called Magic for Smiles, who is a charity that promotes the use of magic as a tool for enhancing well-being through psychological support amongst vulnerable and often traumatized children, mostly but not exclusively refugees. So this is something that is very, very close to our hearts, and we are very, very eager to get this started. But before we do, as always, I just want to tell you that we are still doing these corporate virtual magic shows. We literally did one for Google Summit last week, and it was amazing. We had a great time. We got our kids from the slums of Bogota, Colombia, to perform for over 200 people at a Google Summit. It was amazing. It was amazing. So if you know of somebody that may need entertainment for their virtual events, please let them know about this, about corporate.magicianswithoutborders.com. That's the site where you can find what we do. And if you're asking how it looks or what we do online, here's a little video reminder. Okay, so that was our corporate shows, and I also want to remind you that the last Wednesday of every month we have our Mailbag episode. What does that mean? That means an episode where we answer your questions. So our Mailbag episode this month is going to be the 24th. So if you got questions for us, please send them to us, because we're going to do a Mailbag episode on the 24th. So please do send your questions and comments to podcast@magicianswithoutborders.com or tweet them at magicianswb, and we will be glad to answer your questions or comments on the 24th of February. So remember, the last Wednesday of every month, that's what we do. answering your questions. And before we get started, I need to do another push for our store. Remember, we can have magic go straight to your house in a virtual environment. So go to store.magicianswithout where you can find our shows and our workshops. You can have workshops from our students from the slums of cities in South America in your house so they can teach you some magic. So if you know somebody that wants to learn magic through a workshop, that's the way to go. And also remember that we have a virtual magic course called Become a Magician that you can also get at the store. So remember, store.magicianswithoutborders.com. That would be the place to go and get our magic, and in the meantime supporting us. So please do check that out. And now I want to welcome our founder, Tom Verner. How are you, Tom?
I'm great, Carlos. Always good to be with you. And I wanted to just mention, you just mentioned Become a Magician, and I was contacted today by someone who purchased Become a Magician in San Antonio, Texas. And he's 70 years old, and he's learning magic to entertain his grandchildren. And he's very excited about the magic course, and it was just great to hear from him. So I just wanted to let people know that people of all ages are purchasing Become a Magician and learning magic for all kinds of reasons.
I agree. Very good resource. So, Tom, we want to get into our subject today about changing the state of refugees with humanitarian magic. So, I wanted to ask you, do you agree with that statement that you can change the state of somebody through a magic performance?
Well, there's that story I love to tell about us in a refugee camp on the Iran-Afghan border. And this Afghan elder who had been in the refugee camp for 17 years at that point, he said, since the Russians invaded Afghanistan, he asked us to do 2 magic shows in the mosque for 500 girls and 500 boys. And afterwards, we were sitting having a cup of tea, and he said to me, he said, you know, the international relief organizations take very, very good care of us with shelter, security, food, clothing, everything we need. He said, but you are the first entertainer to ever come to this camp. And he said, you fed with your magic the minds and imaginations of those refugees today, those kids, and they will be thinking and talking about this magic show for months and months. And he said, thank you for feeding them with your magic. That was the phrase that he used, feeding them with your magic. And he said, God bless you. Please come back again. So he kind of answered your question in a way better than I could, I think.
Of course. I know. And when we experience that, I know it's very hard to put into words what that means for us and what we see when it's happening.
Yeah.
But could you add something from your psychological point of view, or from your, if you put on your your psychologist hat? Do you think there's something important or that might stand out that you can share with us?
I think these kids in refugee camps have been through a tremendous amount. The UN High Commission for Refugees published a book, beautiful book, called One Day We Had to Run. And it's a book of children's art written by, illustrated by children, and how violent and traumatic their lives have been. And I think that also when they get trapped in these refugee camps for years and years, decades, there's very little hope, very little possibility in their lives, in their imaginations, and they just kind of shut down. And I'm sure they are all, basically in a depressed, traumatized state. And I think magic, as that elder in that Afghan refugee camp, reawakens their imagination. And it gives them hope, I think, that maybe their impossible situation is not so impossible. That's at least what I'd like to think, and what has been, our experience. I remember one UN public affairs officer in the Sudan. He said, when you tore that paper up and you ate it and said, it looks like all is lost, and then you pulled this 40-foot streamer of color paper out of your mouth, all hooked together beautifully. He said, I felt a wave of hope go through that crowd when they saw that. So that's another response, another way of saying, I think it does awaken them. And
I love it. I think that's a great thing to be able to help dreams flourish, become become more tangible, as we've seen, and a magic show in under those circumstances, in on under, help me with the preposition there, in or under those circumstances is very important.
under prepositions are crazy in English. Under those circumstances, in those circumstances, you could also, on those circumstances, no.
Okay. So, to talk more about this, we've got a great guest. I am eager to get this conversation started. His name is Jamie Balfour-Paul. Hope I'm saying that right. With his stage name, Jamie Jibberish. He is the founder of a Magic for Smiles. And we're going to hear from him in a second. But before we start, I just want to say hi to everybody that's joining us live. I see Michael, who has a great comment. He's saying that our brains communicate through metaphor. And I think that's a great comment. Michael, great to have you here as always. And
it's very wonderful, Michael, to see you. Okay. Yes. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to say hello to Michael. Very, very old friend.
Yes, we love Michael being here and being active, because he's very active in the comments. So we love that. We do love that. And before we talk about more about those metaphors, I just want to show people this great little video that the BBC did on our guests. So we're going to have him right after this little video.
My name is Jamie Blafour-Paul. I'm a magician, and I have a stage name, Jamie Jibberish, because I use a lot of magic language. I call myself a humanitarian magician. That means a magician that doesn't exist on a commercial basis, so magic for vulnerable children. I'm in the Bekaa Valley, in a small camp for Syrian refugees. These kids suffer a lot from the trauma of war and stress in the camps. And what drives me is the smiles and happiness on the faces of those kids. I've been an aid worker for about 30 years, but I always felt that I was missing a trick, as it were. How magic fits into the humanitarian sector. I think kids don't get enough support in play and having fun and things. There's a lot of emphasis on education, which is great, but this area of having fun seems to be marginalized. My vision for the future is for magic to be really integrated into humanitarian programming for vulnerable children.
That's a great introduction. So let's welcome Jamie. How are you?
Hello, Carlos. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Jamie. Wonderful to meet you.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's lovely to meet you.
And thank you for staying up late. I know it's fairly late in the UK at the moment. That's where you are, right? You're in the UK.
Yeah, I'm in the UK. It's about 12:15.
Okay. Thank you very much.
We do appreciate those that effort of being up so late. And that was a wonderful introduction video, but please tell us anything that missed, and after that, how did you get into magic, first of all?
That clip was done, I think sometime last year, sort of. It was before COVID, actually. So I still use it as a kind of summary of what we're really about, because COVID has changed things somewhat. We just work online now. But basically, I got into magic as a kid in the way a lot of kids do. I had a magic kit at the age of about 12, and I like the sense of power and mystery and all of those kind of things. Probably a very psychological explanation. And my first show was with my sister. I think I was about 15, 16. And I stole her bunny for the show in floods of tears. I remember that one quite well. But basically, I'm a humanitarian and a magician. So I've been doing magic since I was a boy, but I've been working until about 5 years ago, when I set up this charity, Magic for Smiles. I was working basically as an aid worker, so I'm a humanitarian. So we can talk about how the charity came into being in that context.
What kind of aid worker, Jamie, before you started the NGO, what kind of aid worker, where were you working? What populations?
Lots of different jobs, from a program manager up to country director, and then I shifted from program management to campaign management. So I was in Egypt and Sudan for a long time, and South Sudan and Uganda, Kenya, Palestine. So mostly Arabic-speaking countries. And also a spell in the UK.
Yeah. That's great.
Okay. So I want to know a little bit more about your performance life of a magician before we get into how the charity came about. So you said you started, very young, doing magic, like most of us started performing for family members. But do you remember like a first show that was kind of big outside of your family that you had a great reaction to?
Well, outside of the family, that was in my university times, really. All the time before that was basically family shows or, And the one I remember is this one about with my sister, because she burst into tears and she'd never forgiven me for it. Because I stole her rabbit. But it was a great show. It was a big show for that age. I was about 15. I was about, 30, 40 people.
Uh-huh.
After that, when I was at university, I started doing shows at weddings and birthday parties, but it was all mostly for friends, but not family. So I just love the sort of. I think it's quite a lonely journey that you can have. But then I started going to magic conventions and meeting other magicians and things. But up to that point, I enjoyed being basically the only one around in my circles. So it was, and still some of that thinking is carrying on into the charity.
Okay. And I love that you brought or that you said that your sister was involved in it, because, well, my sister just had her birthday, and this is a shirt that she gave me of her organization that's improvised based, and she said improvisation is playful resistance. And I do think that when we start doing charitable work with magic, or at least it was my experience, I was improvising the whole way. Like, I knew how to do magic, I knew how to do a stage show, I knew that. But then the how do I get that show all the way to the slums or all the way to the refugee camps? It was, kind of improvised in my end. So I wanted to ask you about that. When did you first started to think about doing something charitable with magic, or as you call it, humanitarian magic? How did that come about?
Well, I think, as I say, I've always been a magician since I was a kid, but I've also been a humanitarian all my career for about almost 30 years. So, and the last few years of that, sort of 2012, 15, I started getting a bit frustrated. I didn't think I was close enough to the coalface, as it were. I was feeling quite old in the organization I was working with. I felt I kind of outgrown. And so, but I was a humanitarian. I had a lot of interaction with refugees and vulnerable children, which you can do like you do in other parts of the world as well. You're not necessarily refugees. But anyway, I was in that region where there's most refugees per capita in the world, and I was also a magician. So it just seemed the right time in my life to bring the two together. And that I was living in Lebanon at the time, working on another job, so I gave that up, and then worked freelance for about 3 years as a magician, a humanitarian magician, and earning a bit of money. A bit of the income came from private stuff, so events and parties and things to cover the humanitarian work, which was paid for sometimes. So, and I had enough sort of capital to kind of backstop it. And it was only late, sort of early 2019, where we actually registered the charity in the UK. So we've only actually been formally registered about, I'm getting on for a couple of years now. Like the first 3 years were just what I call pilot work in Lebanon. And then
Improvisation.
About 2 years ago, I was asked to leave Lebanon because I didn't have a visa. I mean, they wouldn't give me a visa again. I think it's very political there. Anyone who works with refugees and is a bit freelance, is a bit suspect. So there's nothing I can do. I can't even go back there as a tourist.
What do you think the suspicion is that you're actually some kind of doing some kind of surveillance or spying or something like that?
Could be any of those things, yeah. I mean, it's such a political issue. The government wants the refugees to go home, and the refugees don't want to go home because it's not safe. So they don't like people talking to refugees who might communicate a message about staying. So it would have been better if I had been part of a bigger organization. You have that protection. But if you're a bit freelance and a small charity, you're watched.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
I had a ridiculous situation where I was called by security to hand in my passport, and I walked in. I said, and I told them my story, and they said, "Well, say prove it that you're really a magician." So I did a trick to all these security guards, and it was very funny. They didn't make any difference. They're not the decision makers.
Yeah. I've had been forced to do magic shows on many borders around the world.
Yeah.
use their power. And it's been fun most of the time. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, you've got some lovely stories. Yeah. But what I'm keen to explore with you at some point is your concept of vulnerability. I mean, it's not just refugees. I realize that. I happen to be in that part of the world where the number of refugees per capita is very, very high. Lebanon is 1 in 4. So that's about 1.5 million Syrians. So, of course, I've prioritized refugees in a small mandate.
Yeah.
Of course.
And then Turkey and Jordan were the other countries I've got involved with. And they're also very high per capita, about 1 in 8 and then 1 in 10 refugees. So, yeah, very generous.
The refugee situation is, I don't know, the number you hear is different, but the number I hear more often than not is about 60 million, refugees in the world, somewhere around there. And because of climate change, maybe in as early as 2040, there may be as many as 250 million, displaced people.
Yes, I've heard similar figures. I mean, the refugees I've worked with and still work with are sort of conflict-related refugees. So mostly Syrian, also Palestinian, Yemeni, Iraqi. So all those involved in conflict and the trauma associated with conflict. So they're not climate refugees or even natural disasters, all man-made disasters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can argue about which is more traumatic or not on a kid, but it doesn't really. It's good to focus on a certain target group, and that's what I've done. I mean, because we're very small, we don't have. It's just me and volunteers, and if we had funding enough, we might hire some more. And I'm fascinated by how you've sort of generated so many partnerships around the world, and obviously that's the way to spread one's capacity. But it's not easy.
Yeah. We could talk about that, but go ahead, Carlos. I'm going to jot that down as something we can come back to.
Certainly is not easy. Certainly is something that takes time. That it's very hard to pinpoint or not pinpoint to get to a certain point where you can say, hey, this is sustainable. We can do it forever because we figure that out, right? That figuring out, it's I think we're all trying to figure it out. Doing partnerships and finding volunteers all over the world. It's how we've been doing it, but it's tough, certainly. But I wanted to just say that when you do a show like this one, like Jamie Jibberish is going into a refugee camp full of children who are eager to see what's inside that. What's the name of the thing? A chest? No, a box?
Yeah, a chest, a trunk, a chest. Yeah.
I
love that, Jamie. I love that box.
It looks so cool. It looks so cool. So walk us through.
So sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, so go walk us through how a Jamie Jibberish show works when you're like minutes before you're doing that, which I think it's your first entrance to do a show.
Actually, that particular picture was just after a show. I had these were the refugees that couldn't get into the room, where the partner I was working with wanted to hold the show, so that was their decision. And then these were the kids outside, so I did a few trips outside. And that box, because I lived in Egypt a long time, about 7 years, it's an Egyptian box, and it became my logo, that box.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing to stress in the shows, and it's also true in magic workshops as well, like you do. But I mean, the key thing is simplicity. That I'm not interested in sort of high tech or complicated magic. It's about familiar objects and simplicity. It's an entertainment. and I don't reveal all the secrets because the tuition is at a different level, because there has to be a sense of wonder. But it's familiar stuff, and so it's like Tom was saying, these sort of impossible seeming to be possible, and so it has to be familiar, but you make magic out of something that's familiar. And so things like newspapers or balloons or water or oranges, things that the kids have seen.
Yeah.
So I'm not that interested in sort of the best magic at all. It's about making life seem possible when it looks like impossible.
Yeah. I mean, I travel not with a chest that's quite as magical looking as that. That's all. As soon as you bring that in, people are going to be already, their imagination is going to be stimulated, and awakened. And someone the other day, I did a show at a school and a little talk. It actually happened to be a in-person show, very rare these days. And as one of the students wrote a little article for the school newspaper that they sent me, and she just commented on, as I was taking my props out of my suitcase that is all covered with collage and kids, and it's a kind of magical looking suitcase, but she was just already intrigued by the copper cups and the ball and vase and all these different. The magic had already begun, just taking out of the box.
Yeah, I love that picture. These are some Syrian kids in Lebanon who had never really been to school, and this magic show was one of the first occasions they'd been sort of even inside a room, and you can see the expression on how they were suddenly sort of concentrating and captivated and quiet, and the teachers and the staff around there couldn't believe it. They'd never seen them this sort of captivated before and easy to control. They were just there for an hour, and that's a very memorable day that was. Yeah.
And you can you talk a little bit more about all the venues that you've been on? Like, how do they change? For example, we saw you in the room. We saw you here with a great background. So can you talk a little bit more about it? About how are the venues when you do magic for refugees?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably better to look at it on a country basis. But I think, I mean, Lebanon, there aren't really camps because the government doesn't allow it. So the refugees are spread all over the country in sort of smaller settlements. So you would go to a small settlement, and there would be an activity center or a school or something for refugees, which would be a sort of catch-up school for refugees or an activity center, and you would work. There would be an indoor venue there. Sometimes I would do them outdoors, just anywhere. And that picture there is a school in a camp in Beirut, Palestinian camp. And so you'd find the numbers of kids would vary hugely, but usually there was far more kids. I started off, thinking we should have not more than 50 kids because you want impact, but it very quickly realized that's not possible.
Right. Where was that show? The picture before this one with that beautiful background there.
So I was talking about Lebanon. So sort of the kids are spread out. This is in Turkey, and there are more camps in Turkey than in Lebanon, and more refugees. There's about 4 million as opposed to 1.5 million. But the government policy is now to close all the camps and try and integrate the refugees into the community. But that was a mainly a Kurdish community, so quite politically sensitive. But a lot of Kurdish Syrians are coming to join the Kurdish in Turkey, and a lot of them didn't speak Arabic, let alone, yeah. So I had to have translation there because the Syrians prefer to speak in Turkish.
Yeah. That,
So, so
that's
Turkey, and then Jordan. There are also camps in Jordan, but again, it's a bit of a fallacy to say that most refugees are in camps, because they're not. So it would be there could be. It was more common. I would go to some camps and perform in activity centres and things, and usually indoors. But in there could be lots of diverse locations in Jordan, like churches and other villages around the country which are not camps. This is in Lebanon, also a school for Syrians, and you can see how. I mean, I said I wanted half those kids, but you know.
Oh yes, that happens a lot when you go to a place and they're like, "Ah, we'll just bring some kids to the magic show." They just fill the room, fill the room.
Unfortunately, they gave me a big stand there, so I was able to kind of elevate myself.
Yeah.
That one's easier. That one's easier when you got a little thing to stand on.
Yeah, and also, as you would know, I mean, the ages of the kids. I mean, I was doing a puppet thing there, so which is really for younger kids, but you can't really. Again, I learned quickly not to be too strict about age range either, because there's too many kids. But so you tended to do magic shows which are sort of for all ages. Sort of, I used to say 6 to 12, but there would be older and younger sometimes. But I learned not to be too strict on the age range. For the tuition workshops, it was different, and they came really only about in the last couple of years, and they were much stricter. It'd be interesting to compare your model with the one we're running, but it's sort of it's about minimum of 2 sessions and 15 kids and learning about 5 tricks.
Can you talk a little bit more about that tuition? Because I am very interested in how or why you came to the realization, or it was a need that you saw, or something that you realized about not shifting but adding, the teaching element to your humanitarian magic. How did that come about?
I think as the years go by and you think more about sort of sustainable as well as what's giving kids fun. Yeah, unfortunately, it's the tuition that you're transferring a skill, and I mean your concept of training magicians to perform is basically the same concept, but we're quite a long way behind that. We're teaching kids to. It's a 2-day course, and on the second day they just perform, but they're learning to perform to their peers. They're not really learning to make money out of magic. And but it was a realization that to get to stronger partnerships, you have to have some skills to transfer, and it was just easier to integrate into programming, which was my vision. I don't want to just do a one-off show. I'd like to see a regular engagement with the same partner, and tuition was more popular basically than shows.
Yeah, I think Jamie, that was my same experience. We didn't actually do any teaching, certainly any formal kind of teaching for the first 7 years. We just, our mission, you probably know, to entertain, educate, and empower.
Yeah,
and
it's easy to remember, yeah.
The education and empower piece didn't really happened for 7 years. And it happened a little bit kind of accidentally, we were asked by a doctor in El Salvador if we could teach a few kids who were doing really well in school. They had been living in a garbage dump, and they were out of the garbage dump and in school, and 12 of them were doing really well. And the doctor said, "Do you think you could as a reward for them doing really well in school, they had a little place where the kids gathered after school to do their work because they lived in a very dangerous, difficult neighborhood. So we went to that center and we spent the day with them and taught them about 6 tricks, very simple tricks. Because I wasn't prepared, I didn't bring like lots of props or anything. I think I did give away some of my props to them. But at the end of the day, one of the kids, Jaime, he said, "When are you coming back?" And that changed the entire mission of Magicians Without Borders, that one question, when are you coming back? And we've now been to El Salvador probably 30 times, and we set up camps for the kids. But really the way we're able to, and it was that sustainability that you're talking about, just the one-off shows were terrific. And I think, they brought a certain kind of momentary happiness to the refugees and relief from the stress. And even refugees have said, I didn't think at all about my troubles for that whole hour, and it was like shocking to hear that, Go ahead.
So education, so teaching and tuition is important, but I think your Afghan story is very pertinent in this case because although it's a one-off show, like he said, it's a reference point. Those kids will talk about it for months, and they do, and so it's not really one-off. It's a one-off impact, but it's a one-off event, but the repercussions will go on for a long time. So I'm okay about doing one-off performances. I've decided that's fine, but it needs to be accompanied by tuition to make it more saleable. Really, unfortunately.
And like you said, for those street kids, who you said it might have been, they haven't even been inside very often, let alone seen a performance, let alone seen a magic performance. And it's something very new and exciting for them. And they probably will.
I think that's a double-edged sword. It's a novelty, which makes it exciting, but it's also a reason why partners are often a bit hesitant about investing too much time in certainly an integrated sort of regular approach to magic because it's a novelty. It doesn't really fit their curriculum or their way of doing things. It's normally the context of this the magic was normally in some sort of PSS or psychosocial program.
Yeah.
And they have established ways of doing things, and their donors tell them what they should do and shouldn't do. So it's the novelty that's both good and bad.
Yeah.
They're not so good for their partners.
I had a very powerful experience in El Salvador. We were going out. I was in a truck with a couple of other folks, and this woman, Marion, was driving, and we went by this garbage dump in Camalapa, near Santa Ana. And she said, that's where the Barefoot Angels used to live, in that garbage dump. And I said, please, could we go down there? And she looked at me and she said, okay. So we drove down, and we came to one of the most horrific sights I had ever seen. It was this black, smoldering plastic, and it was filled with vultures and wild pigs and children rummaging through this for something to salvage, to sell, or to eat, or whatever. And we then went down, and there were kids, and there was a truck dumping some garbage, and the kids were climbing up on the truck to have the first go at the new garbage. And they were often killed that way. They would be buried under the garbage. Just horrific. So I said to the woman, I said, let's do a magic show for these kids, and so we backed the truck up, and I stood in the back of the truck, and all these kids gathered around, and I did a show for them. And it was truly, truly wonderful. And
that was in El Salvador? Did you say?
This was in El Salvador.
Yeah.
And so we're driving out of the dump, and nobody is talking in the truck, like something really almost secret or certainly very special had just happened. And Marian says to me, she's the first one who speaks. We're back on the road. Nobody has said anything. I mean, it was this eerie silence in the truck. And she says, time has now been changed for those children. And I said, what do you mean, Marian? She said, time will now be measured between before the magician came and after the magician.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about it for maybe years. Yeah.
And so it's more than Oneoff, but it was amazing what she said. Time has now been changed.
My time in Egypt is lots of other characters in Egypt. They're very famous, but they're very vulnerable kids. So they're not refugees, but they're very poor on health hazards and all sorts of other things, education.
Yeah.
So I wasn't doing magic in Egypt actually much, because that was before I started the charity.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh no, that's in Lebanon. Yeah, that's an example of a tuition workshop. But I've got better at doing it since then, because there's too many kids there, and they're sort of lots of different ages. But it worked because it was quite a confined space, and I love that picture of that kid learning how to do cups and balls.
Yeah.
That's just so wonderful to see them perform. I think that's a great thing. And I would love to share a video of you actually inviting people to learn about the tuition program. Let me just show it right here.
Hello, my name is Jamie Blafour-Paul. I'm the founder of Magic for Smiles. One of the activities we do is magic tuition workshops. And recently in Jordan, we worked with a wonderful organization called Collateral Repair Project. And in the following footage, you'll see the performance of some of the trainees after the tuition. We put a lot of emphasis on performance for issues like self-confidence and self-esteem. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you got a bit confused at this point.
Yeah. Pretty awesome.
And yeah, abracadabra is a universal word.
I think it's a great video, and it just shows exactly that, the humanitarian aspect of your work. And I think
so those will be there were a mixture of Palestinian and Syrian refugees in Jordan, But I think it illustrates the benefits which you're aware of. We classify on our website. We classify the benefits in terms of cognitive, emotional, and social. So cognitive is like imagination and concentration and analysis, and the emotional is the joy and the happiness and the wonder and the hope and that kind of thing. And social is sort of around interaction and self-esteem and self-confidence. And it's the tuition that's, as you said, Tom, it's kind of, it's mainly talking to those benefits, self-confidence and self-esteem, because the performance is what it's all about.
Yeah. I think originally I had the kind of feeble idea that these kids were going to become magicians, and they were going to make money doing magic. And it's hard enough to make money as a magician in the UK or the United States, where there's an economy, But in El Salvador, where there's nothing, I mean, it's hard to make a few dollars there, doing anything. And so what we've really come to realize is that what we're teaching are the things you just said, Jamie. We're teaching self-confidence, discipline, focus, self-esteem, social skills, that then they can, and things start happening when you work with the kids on an ongoing basis, is they start wanting more in their life. They want the impossible. They want to be a nurse. They want to.
The objective is not to train magicians, but to get them skills through magic.
Yeah, and that really became very clear after a few years. I mean, some of them do make a little bit of money doing magic, a birthday party here and there, or a little this or that. But for the most part, it gives them a sense of confidence and possibility. And then they go on to do something else. And we have a scholarship fund to help make those possibilities a reality.
That's great. Yeah. So we're just about building up life skills through magic. Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe there might be some way that we can collaborate, and
I'm sure we will. I'm pretty sure we
will. Lessons to be shared, because there's not, at least in my world, there's not a lot of actors, well, not in the Middle East anyway, using magic in this way, or using magic at all. There's a few commercial magicians, but that's it. It's been very hard to build up the partnerships, which is why I'd like to work with other magicians in the region, but I don't find them, and they're not really humanitarian. They're commercial.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm fascinated by your organization, because I've given presentations of Magic for Smiles at magic conventions in this country, but not a lot of interest. The interest is much more from the humanitarian community, for which I'm familiar as well, and that's a problem. It's quite a challenge, that the kind of the rights of the kids is more of an issue for has more resonance with the humanitarian community than the magic community. So I was interested that you have an advisory board of basically magicians, which is interesting. For me, it's looking more like the humanitarian, So, but it hasn't really worked. So I'm sort of shifting towards more of a magic magician, but it's hard to find those particular people.
I think that's a great point you're touching, because I feel that magicians are very eager to share their magic when the conditions are easy, right? say just go there, or this place, everything's set up, just go there and do your show. They're there, right? Magicians say, yeah, I'll do it. Right? If it's like, hey, we're going to go jump on a truck, go drive 10 hours, but we have to take 2 planes and then stay in the house of somebody else to do, they're like, yeah, maybe not, right? And when you try and picture this long term, it's even harder to picture. When you're saying like, when I still tell magician friends that, or magicians that I've had an acquaintance with years back, they're like, "Are you still doing that? Like, how on earth are you still doing it? Right? How is that sustainable? How are you able to live of that?" And again, we don't have the answer to it, but we're making it happen. And the idea of that at the advisory board is that we want to get more big magician names that will attract other magicians, but on our advisory board there's also people from the humanitarian world. So we got Rita, for example, in Nigeria, who runs
Yeah,
a
that's
one.
true. I noticed that. Yeah, it's true. But
Yes.
I'm just making the point that generally the kind of the evangelism of the role of magic and the potential of magic, it seems to be more needed in the magic community than the humanitarian.
I think you're absolutely right, Jamie. That has been my experience as well. I find magicians extremely generous in many ways with other magicians, like an older magician and a younger magician, really taking, we were talking about that last week, how both of us had experiences as young magicians with an older magician, Aldo Colombini for Carlos and Slidini for me. We met them in a coffee shop, both of us 20 years apart, and they shared everything with us. But as far as doing humanitarian magic, I have had the same experience. It's just very, very difficult among the. But when you find one, like Carlos found this man Jacques in South Africa, he just is a commercial magician, but he just has a big heart, and he really wants to use his magic in some other way, and we have found those around the world who partner with us, and we'd love to pay them, but we can just supply them with props for their students, but we can't pay them yet. We'd love to, but we can't. And some of them don't want to be paid. The woman in India, the magician, she said, when I suggested, she said that would ruin it. That would ruin it. She used the word sacred. She said, "This is sacred work. I don't want to be paid." So
I think we're trying to find the pieces of it to work. So the magician pieces and the humanitarian piece, and the living off this, because I think living off doing humanitarian work, it's hard. Living off doing magic is hard. So it's like two hearts together. It's like we're still trying to
I mean, the whole thing operation relies on donations, which I mean, the odd grant and stuff, and some of the organizations that can pay fees for the service, I mean, then they pay. But I think the experience in the past few years is basically you rely on donations, and that's not a great way to operate, but it doesn't seem to be an alternative.
It's the way we operate, Jamie. I mean, we only have individual donors. The average donation is around $85. Some people give $5. Occasionally we get $1,000 donation, but we therefore don't have to charge for any, and if somebody wants to pay us for a show or fly us somewhere, that happens very rarely, but we'll take it. I'm sorry, go ahead, James.
It seems to depend on the partner organizations themselves, what their donors tell them and what their budgets are. We don't have a strict, we tried having you have to pay policy of a tiered system. If you don't have a budget, you pay this much in kind. And we had a tiered system, but it didn't work. So it's basically for free unless you can pay. So, but I'm fascinated that you've managed to continue for so long, dependent on donations. So you must have built up a good network supporters, and that's
We do.
I think we're in that position where we're still building up that support base, which is quite small.
Yeah, I think what has really helped us was early on. We developed some really good relationships with organizations like the UNHCR and like in Ethiopia, the Public Information Officer Mahari Maasho. We had to get ourselves there. We had to pay for our hotel, which was only $12 a night in a really good Ethiopian hotel. So it wasn't real expensive. But he provided us with transportation. He set up all the shows in the refugee camps. We could stay in the refugee camp in the UN compound. So once we got there, we didn't have too many expenses, other than lodging and food, somewhat, even some of that was covered by the UN.
That me coming into this is challenging that way of sustainability, quote unquote, because I see that we need another source of income. We do need something that's different than donations. We still need them, but we need to, how I see it is like a little triangle, and the three sides of the triangle need to generate income. One is the donations, the other one would be grants that you can get, right? And the other one would be selling services. And all of those sides of the triangle should be as the same side. I don't know how to say a triangle with the same sides in English. Equilátero is the name in Spanish. Equilátero.
That's it in English also.
Equilateral. The paid services would be more for your corporate engagement.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So that's what we do. So we try and build the little triangle so that we don't depend exclusively on one. So before I got to Magicians Without Borders, I run an NGO that I still do, and whose main source of income is the selling products part. So, and that's the way I've sustained it for wow, it's almost a decade now. So we still need to challenge that way, because when you have that side of selling services and you have the money, right, you don't have to, quote unquote, answer to any donors, right? So you made the money because you provided a service, and you can do that money whatever you want, right? So you can go and provide the same service that you want to the refugees, but on your own, right? So and I guess that frees you a little bit more on what you can do and cannot do, but still it's a working process. Like there's no answer.
Yeah. So I guess we have a much smaller sort of commercial wing, but legally that has to be classified as fundraising. So it goes into the charity bank account, but it's drawn from basically a commercial event, and you raise money or get paid, and it goes that way. So I under UK charity law, it's quite hard to. You don't want to sort of blur the lines between me making money and the charity making money. So everything goes into the charity. That's just easier legally.
But you could
around and remember that there's charities that do make money by selling stuff. Everybody has a UN, shirt, right, or a UN mug or whatever, right? So there are ways to sell things that go into the profits of the nonprofit, or a little side thing that it's just a for-profit, and you.
There's lots of other
but still, the world is not made for this. The world is not made for the things that we want to do. We have to find a way to make this work with the current.
What were your triangles? The commercial, the
donation, the grants,
and grants. Yeah. So we've got we have grants as well. So we've got the same triangle. Yeah. But one grant a year.
Equilateral, right? It has to be.
You need fundraising capacity. I have a new set of trustees now with fundraising skills included. and so hopefully we'll get more grants. But I've only got one last year and one this year, about 5,000 quid each time. So it's not to be sniffed at. It helps a lot, but it's quite hard to attract donors to this thing because it's new.
Very competitive, and it's very competitive, and it's hard to get data that supports our work.
And then with COVID, it's even more difficult to find money. So
I agree.
It's been a very difficult year for fundraising, for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's been tough.
Although magic is a real sort of resource for COVID. You know, as a lockdown activity. You know, what better thing is there than magic? The kids stay at home. So, but it's not familiar enough, and there must be some donors out there that are keen on magic as we're looking for lockdown activities, but the majority are just doing basics.
Do you think, Jamie, that there must be refugee communities like in London, right? Like neighborhoods, and that they have a center, you know, a Pakistani center or an Indian or whatever? Are there, or Sudanese or?
Oh, very much so, yes. They tend to be the sort of long-established diaspora communities like you'd have in the US, but the recent wave of refugees from Syria and places, so you tend to have I know Bath welcomes refugees, Cheltenham welcomes refugees, Sevenoaks welcomes refugees. So these regional organizations whose mandate is to welcome refugees, and so I've started working with some of them just to, you know, give their kids a bit of a better time.
Yeah. I mean, is that a place where you could set up, like get a group of 10 children, like ages 10 to 12, 13, something like that, and meet with them once a week and teach them magic on an ongoing basis? Do you think is there a...
I mean, potentially, yeah. Right now, it's very strict in the UK. I mean, everything's locked down. And
right. I'm not thinking COVID. I'm
yeah. No, I think in the longer term, possibly. I mean, I wasn't working in the UK at all until COVID started. It's just because the demand isn't enough in the Middle East because of COVID and all the other priorities, and the fact that kids can't come together much because the government doesn't allow it in these countries.
Yeah, we had a listener last week. She may be listening this week. I don't know. Her name was Kathy, and she works with refugees here in Vermont, where I work. And she and I have communicated this past week. You'll be happy to hear this, Carlos. And we're about to set up some shows and some teaching as soon as, you know, in the next 3 or 4 months, hopefully, when things...
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, those kids, refugees in the US or the UK, you know, they hold a lot of trauma still, and so
absolutely, for sure.
I mean, just because limited resources, I wasn't targeting the UK, but I am now because of COVID. I don't know about the longer term, but
Okay, so I know we want to get back to how things were before COVID, but as you said before, Jamie, magic is very versatile, so it does work a lot online. So I just want to show this little video of you working online and people, you know, asking for more.
Hey, are you happy? Yes. Yes. Finish the show?
No, carry on. Carry on, please. Carry on. One more. Please. One more. Carry on.
You finish now, but we can do another show maybe.
Okay. Maybe.
And also, we do lessons. If anyone wants to learn magic,
I do.
I want to learn.
I want.
Me.
I think that's wonderful. All the kids wanting more and wanting more. I think it's just wonderful.
Yes.
Come on, let me just change it. I think it's wonderful. All the kids just saying, "Hey, we want more. We want more." So
Yeah.
we really want more for you. So we wanna just turn this space to a little fundraising moment. So if you are listening and if you would like to support the work that Magic for Smiles is doing for refugee children, right now virtual, but as soon as it changes back to being not online, you can go to justgiving.com/magic for smiles or to the Magic for Smiles website, and you can just go and donate there to support the work that Jamie is doing, which it's now online and it brings reactions like this one.
Yalla, happy birthday.
Very simple magic, but yeah. So there's just one pot for Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and the UK now.
That's perfect. So if you want to support this, please go to justgiving.com/magic for smiles. And well, Jamie, we're sure, or I am sure that this is not going to be the last time that we speak.
I
But
hope
we
not.
had a blast. It's been a blast, Jamie. Thank you for joining us. We had a great time with you today.
Yes, fantastic. No, I'm really pleased to have this conversation. It will continue because collaboration is key, and it's quite a lonely sort of field, and it's great that you share the same passion.
Okay, well, let's keep this up. And collaboration is so important in all aspects of life, including
Yes.
this work. So
I agree that we have each other now to support each other. So very glad that this happened. So everybody that's listening, thank you for joining us, and well, we'll see you next week.
okay,
Bye.
bye, Jamie.
Bye bye. Be in touch.
Thanks again.